5 down, the next step then is to go through this little case study we're going to go through now. Now, let's say that you're selling a software package, and one of the main objections you often hear from prospects, potential clients, is that they're scared to try the software because it looks complicated to use. Okay? Put yourself in that position. You're selling a software package, and one of the main objections you often hear from prospects is that they're scared to try the software because it looks complicated to use. Now, keep in mind that you now know that when you're presenting this software in the client's mind, you know they're thinking, it's too complicated, I don't know if I can use this. So here's the response block structure I'd like you to write out. So on the left-hand side, we have the client objections. We're then going to say, let's just go ahead and write in the objection that we think the client has in their head. The client is thinking the software is too complicated. I'm a technophobe. In other words, a technophobe is somebody who's not really good with technology. Now, let's say that you know you're selling software and you know that that customer is thinking, this software is too complicated. I'm a technophobe. I'm not going to be able to use it. Now, do you wait for them to raise the objection? No, because as we've stated, when they raise the objection, it becomes a public statement and they're more likely to stick to that statement. So what we want to do is block it. And the first step in blocking is to raise the objection. So here's what I would do. I would say something like this. Mr. Client, many of our existing clients think our software is hard to use, and that's understandable. What did I just do? I just raised the objection. I then offered to resolve it. I said, but let me show you how easy it is to you that even you'll agree a technophobe such as yourself could use it. Okay? So in other words, I've offered to resolve that objection that the client had in his mind. Then I go ahead and demonstrate. In this case, I would actually go ahead and show the software, click, click, drag, drop, type a couple of things in, move around the software, and then once I finish demonstrating or demoing the software, I would then try to tie down that objection. And I would say something like this. Based on what I've shown you, do you think you could do this yourself with a little practice and a little support? And then I wait for the customer to actually say yes. Now, let's walk through the psychology of this very carefully. Let's go back to the objection statement. Many of our existing clients think our software is hard to use, and that's understandable. I've raised the objection that he thinks the software is too complicated. Now let's go all the way over to the tie down. Based on what I've shown you, do you think you can do it yourself with a little practice and support? And then I wait for the answer, yes. When the client says, yeah, you know what, I think I can do this. Based on what you've shown me with a little practice, yes, I think I can do this. Now, once the customer says, yes, I think I could do this with a little practice and support, you've just blocked or closed that objection. So in other words, as you're moving through the sales process, getting the customer closer to buying, the customer, once you get to the end and you make that offer like, shall we get the process started, the customer is not going to come back and say, well, the software is too hard to use. The reason why they're not going to say that is because you've already tied the objection down early in the actual process. In other words, once you ask the key question, based on what I've shown you, do you think you could do this yourself with a little practice and support? And they say, yes, I can. They just made a public commitment and they're more likely to stick to that. That is called blocking the objections or closing that objection. So when you get to the end of the sales process, if you've blocked or closed all the objections, by the time you get to the end of the sales process and you're ready to close, there should be no more objections left and the close should be that much easier. Now, let's understand the psychology also of what's happening in the background. Most people make the mistake when they're selling is that every customer has some level of resistance. So first phase of any sales process is to begin to learn how to reduce the sales resistance. And you reduce the sales resistance by using objection blocking, and we'll show you that in just a minute. You then want to increase sales acceptance by gaining commitment. Let's say it again. As I'm talking to somebody, I want to reduce the sales resistance by blocking their objections. I then want to increase their sales acceptance by gaining commitment. This is how it works. Most people make the mistake of trying to increase sales acceptance by gaining commitment early on in the sales process. Now, let's go back and tie this back to the response block structure, and let's go through that example again. Software's too complicated, I'm a technophobe. Now, when I say something like many of our existing clients think our software is hard to use, and that's understandable, I just raised an objection that the customer had in his mind but was afraid to bring up. And when I do that, they feel a sense of relief because I'm they're thinking to themselves, well, I'm glad he brought it up because I didn't want to bring it up. At that point, I've just reduced the sales resistance. Let's think about what the customer is thinking. The salesperson has just raised an objection they had in their mind. He's going, whew, I'm glad he brought it up. At least he's being straightforward and honest. And then when I offer to resolve it, I say something like, let me show you how easy it is, that even you'll agree. And what am I trying to do? Just literally reduce that resistance just a bit. Now, when I go into the demo phase, I now want to demonstrate my expertise in the power of the actual software, and so I'm trying to gain some commitment here. And then when I go for the tie down, based on what I've shown you, do you think you could do it yourself with a little practice and support? I'm actually getting that full commitment and hoping the customer will say, yeah, I think I can do it with a little practice and a little support. So in other words, we first want to reduce the sales resistance, but we then want to gain commitment and acceptance. But the key here is that when you get to the tie down, you have to wait for the customer to say yes. Once the customer says, yes, I think I can use the software, they cannot bring up that objection at the end of the sales process when you're ready to close. That's the power of response blocking. Let's take another example. Pretend you're a credit card company, you're trying to sell a debit card. And one of the objections you often get is, I have my own debit card, why do I need another one? Now, again, instead of waiting for the prospect to raise that objection saying, I already have one, I don't need another one, what we want to do is raise the actual objection. So you might want to say something like this. Many of our existing clients tell me they already have a debit card, why get another one? In other words, I've just raised the objection. I then offer to resolve it, but if I can show you how having a debit card will help you save time and money, would you at least consider getting one? And what am I trying to do in these two steps? Simply reduce resistance. I then go ahead and show them how our debit card is actually better, if not cheaper, than what they're currently using. And once I do this, I'm just trying to gain some commitment. Once I'm done with the demonstration phase of this, I can now say, based on what I've shown you, can you see how using our debit card will save you time and money? And what you want them to say is absolutely. Again, what you're trying to do is gain that commitment right there and then. Now, one I often get is, I don't need any sales training. I've been in sales many years and I've heard it all. Well, I know that most people will think that if I'm selling a sales training program. So what do? Before they bring that up or make that statement, what I want to do is raise the objection. I'll say something like this. Many of you have been in sales many years and probably know more than me. Again, reduce the resistance by basically saying, yeah, you might know more than I do. But then I offer to resolve it. But if I can show you one or two new things that can help you increase your sales, would that be worth your time? Again, what am I trying to do? Reduce resistance. So then I would go through some sales techniques that I could show them that I know they don't know. And all I'm trying to do is demonstrate that I know what I'm talking about. So I'm trying to what? Increase my commitment. And then after I showed them a couple of things, I can say something like, based on what I've shown you thus far, do you think you can use this blocking strategy to increase your close rate? And most likely they're going to say, yeah, you're right, I can use that. This is response block selling in a nutshell. We want to raise the objection, and then we want to tie it down so it doesn't come back to haunt us at the end of the sales process when we're ready to close. Now, let's go through what we have to do. To build a persuasive presentation, the first step is to first list the expected objections. So again, take the time to list all the objections your clients are going to give you. Once you've done that, use the response block structure to develop your sales pitch or script. In other words, write everything out so once you start using it, it becomes natural. You can then build your slide presentation or your sales pitch accordingly. So in other words, let's say there are 5 typical objections your client's going to give you. What you then do is create a response block structure for each of those 5 objections, and then you can build a slide presentation or just memorize the script so that when you're talking to a customer, you can actually start what? Knocking down those objections one by one by using the response block structure. See, the key here is often said that if you remove the objections up front, the sales closes itself at the end. I've modified this a bit to say if you block the objection, because again, we don't want them to make the statement because a statement equals a commitment, therefore it's that much harder to convince them otherwise. So what we want to do is block the objection up front, and if we do so, and then gain commitment throughout the presentation, by the time we get to the end, the sale should close itself. Now that we talked about